Alright, Custer. I need you to investigate this little Bighorn Valley. We're better than that. Don't engage till I'm there to mind you. And there better be a drink in it for me. Understood, General Terry.
7th Cavalry is a 1985 game by Black Knight Software written by Edward Grabowski. It costs £3.50. Available as a Z80 snapshot on Spectrum Computing, I downloaded it. You get a nice loading type screen. You can then break into the code and see that it does all its loading at the start. You have the loading of the screen, then loading of some machine code. From this, I was able to reconstruct a tape, which will be the foundation of our improvements as we go forwards. I've done a full playthrough of this, available on the YouTube, no commentary, and it's got some issues. But I think we can fix these. I'm going to use a program from Supercharge Your Spectrum by David Webb called Trace48. It's a trace function where you can tell on the screen which line numbers of BASIC you are executing. So unlike a monitor for machine code, we tell what byte you're executing. That's very hard to do with BASIC because you're in machine code deep in the bowels of the Spectrum 1. This tells you what lines of code you're executing in the line numbers at the top of the screen. On pressing a key, you're presented with this screen, which says press 1 for play a new game, 2 to continue an old campaign, or 3 to copy the program to microdrive 1. On the top right, you see a number on a black background that flickers between a set of numbers in the 1000 range. This is our currently executing line number, and it's currently changing quite a lot because we're executing code. The code we're executing is between lines 1010 and 1050, and as can be seen, is looking for in keys being 1, 2 or 3. Once you press a key, we're on to the next section. This asks us to enter our surname to play the game, maximum of 9 letters. Note the line number at the top is not changing because we're currently in an input statement on line 1920. The screen clears, we execute code in the 5000 range, bit of machine code, the randomised USR 60002, then we're into 3 loop where it sets up 12 things, 40 things and 15 things. These are the cavalry units, the Indians, and the camps. This printing routine takes 7 seconds. You then have a 1/3 of a second window to press a key, and then it goes off to line 9000 or so, which moves the enemy while you're thinking. This takes 1 1/3 second. We then go back to checking for the keys. Once you press a key, you have as long as you like to take action. Once you do move though, there's another 7-second delay while it prints everything, and we return to the 1/3 of a second. Am I listening? 1 1/3 moving the enemies. This is an issue because you're using in keys, and in keys it only checks are you pressing a key right now. This is why in my playthrough I was able to break the game by holding down the letter M. By holding down the letter M, the Native Americans got very little chance to move, so I could just rampage around the map. On the other hand, if you don't press a key at all, for example you're chatting to your mum or something, the entire 7th Cavalry may be wiped out outside their fort at 8 AM on Tuesday morning before a single minute has passed. There's a lot of good stuff in this game. Let's make it Custer! The 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty established the Great Sioux Reservation, including ownership of the Black Hills, for as long as the grass would grow and the buffalo would roam. In 1874, the United States government sent Custer in as part of an expedition, which found gold. The Black Hills were then overrun with gold-seeking miners. The Black Hills produced 10% of the entire world's gold supply over the next 125 years. Worse than that, with unscrupulous antique dealers.
Small bridge.
The stage was set for war. This is the original loading screen for 7th Cavalry by Edward Grabowski. It's got some nice features on there. In the distance you can see the cavalry fort. You've got a cavalry-style pennant with the American flag. You've got a buffalo hide drying rack, and then you've got the wigwams. You've got yellow on green, which isn't great, but also the colours themselves are rather blocky. If you switch to black and white TV mode, you can see that much clearly, where the blocks of colour aren't quite correct. It doesn't look very nice, which is a shame. If I load the screen in and then strip away the colours by poking the attribute bytes, we can see that the line art is in fact excellent. There's really good line art, but you're limited by the ZX Spectrum's colour to only having 2 colours per square, and because it's chosen to have black lines on things, you're then limited in what you can have at the background. If instead you had solid colours, you could maybe do a nicer job. In the spirit of walking a mile in another man's moccasins, I started to create my own loading screen for 7th Cavalry. I build up a simple screen. We start off with a yellow background, because it's the desert, because we're in America, which, as we all know from the westerns, is all deserty and dry. There's the blue sky. I'm using blue, bright blue, not cyan. And then we get a rectangle of red and a rectangle of white. This is the cavalry flag, but cavalry flags or guidons are swallow-tailed. So using draw over, I remove a triangle from each part, then put the number 7, because we are the 7th Cavalry. There's the cavalry fort. This is done with the sugar cube built-in graphics. Again, a simple cactus, green blocks, and the shadow is made up with the non-bright yellow. 4 wigwams, a couple of lines and a curved line. Some vultures, perhaps. It's a simple image. It's childish rather than childlike. Nowhere near as good as the original. You've got the cavalry troopers there in blue. Credit to the original author at the bottom. Also notice this is a snorkified version, so it's not the original. It's a remix. So there's a big gap on the left of the screen, so I started to fill that with a river, using cyan for that, but a bit of variation. 3 curved lines, and then some red UDGs, the reverse of the cavalry ones, to represent the Sioux and the Cheyenne. When it comes to snorkifying, the important thing is to start somewhere and start making a difference. The easiest thing to change will be the names of the company commanders. So rather than the names which came in the game, I researched from various books the names of the actual commanders of the 7th Cavalry at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Troop A was commanded by Moylan, Troop B by MacDougall, Troop C by Thomas Custer, George's brother. Troop D was commanded by Weir, Troop E, the Grey Horse Company, commanded by Smith, Troop F by Yates, Troop G by Mackintosh, Troop H by Benteen, the next company by Keogh, Troop K by Godfrey, Troop L by Calhoun, and finally Troop M by French. On looking at the code, I was surprised to find that the author only used 2 user-defined graphics. There is a graphic for hoofprints of the Indians, and also a graphic for the Indian camps. So why not give the officers of the 7th Cavalry their own rank? So appropriately, I've created a lieutenant rank, or lieutenant in the American parlance, and attached these graphics before each name. So there's Lieutenant Moylan, Captain MacDougall, Captain Thomas Custer, who won the Congressional Medal of Honor not once but twice, Lieutenant Weir, Lieutenant Smith. We skip a bit, go on to Captain Benteen, Captain Keogh, who previously worked for the Pope, which is why he has the keys of St. Peter in his pocket. He worked for the Pope until Garibaldi defeated the Pope, then he went to America to get more work. Lieutenant Godfrey, Lieutenant Calhoun, et dernier, mais pas le moi, Capitaine French. Version 3 is a small change. In the original, the player enters their name, and they are then put in command of Company A. Company A is now commanded by Lieutenant Moylan. So what is the point of the player's name? But they're the commander of the 7th Cavalry. So now, when you enter the status screen, your name appears at the top as Lieutenant Colonel, whatever your name is. Seventh Cavalry, all ready and correct, sir.
Now, boys, we've been given orders to advance and evacuate blankets on the Little Bighorn River. We're better than that. The men are ready, Colonel Custer. Their sabres are sharpened, ready to face the enemy. I see you've all got very shiny sabres, but I'll tell you, we don't need old-fashioned sabres. You can get rid of them. You throw them in the bin. That's good, Colonel. We're going to tell those lonesome riders, tell those ramblers, the gamblers, the backsliders that Richard Gatling's going to cut them down. Whoa there, Majorino. We'll have no new-fangled weapons either. We'll deal with good old-fashioned revolvers and carbines. Oh.
Version 6 now. Let's add some more user-defined graphics, this time for the Cavalry. We're only using 4 so far, so there's plenty left, and I thought, why not have each cavalry troop or company have its own little flag, or cavalry guidon, as modelled here by myself. It's a swallowtail flag, red and white, with the company identifier in the top. It's a little bit small, and owing to ZX Spectrum limitations, you can't have 3 colours on the same square. So we've got a sort of outline of the white at the bottom and a bit of white on the right you have to pretend isn't there. But it just about works. I'm not sure how visible it will be on a real TV with RF. However, you get the impression there's something there that looks a bit cavalry, and you still get the name of the troop at the bottom. The game has a day and night cycle. When it gets to 10 PM, the border goes black because it's now night time. At night time, troops can only move at a walk, and movement is tiring. There is something strange that happens at midnight, in that the clock doesn't tick over to the next day, but in fact ticks over to 24. Then it's 24:15, 24:30, 24:45, and then we only go to the next day at 1 AM. In version 7, I fixed this. So now the clock ticks over to Wednesday at midnight. And just to prove it still works, at 1 AM we're still Wednesday. Daylight arrives at 6 AM. While trying to demonstrate some other bugs, I came across a rather sneaky one. This is the one I fixed in version 8. In version 7 I spotted this. There is a line of code that adds up the villages you've destroyed, but it was using the wrong variable. It was using the array X, not the array W. However, this only applies if you run out of time. So in this game here I've destroyed 13 villages, but I then run out of time when we check over to Tuesday, and the game tells you that there are in fact 15 camps left and my food has run out. I fixed this in version 8. While trying to capture this though, I originally thought this was a game breaking bug, as in you couldn't win the game. In fact, it only happens if you run out of time. What was sneakier and nastier was one I ran into just by pure chance. Here I'm destroying lots of villages, except I couldn't get all 15 villages and I couldn't work out why. And then I noticed the village at the bottom of the screen, just above the number 5 here. It turns black and then turns yellow again. Here's that zoomed in. See, the village is black, then the village is yellow. Let's slow that down. The problem is there are 2 camps in the same location. The cavalry are on a location with a camp, so they destroy it, but they don't notice the second secret camp. It is therefore impossible to win, and that's just pure chance. Moving on to version 10A, the game was written in the 1980s, where calling Native Americans Red Indians was still quite common. It's not the thing you do today. What's the polite term? Or you could say Native Americans, but the most polite way is actually use the tribe they're from. So what I tried to do is do some research and give the 40 units their own tribal names. But I also wanted to highlight some of the leaders they had, or the more famous warriors. So I divided the 40 bands into groups of 8. There were 5 groups of 8. Every 8th one was an individual with a famous name. And I did this, as you can see here, with some data statements. In version 11, I decided that the cavalry had UDGs, so why not have the Native Americans have UDGs? So they got a little user-defined graphic of a bloke on a horse with a bow. I also changed the tracks icon to be more like hoof prints. I'm not entirely sure they had horseshoes, but we all know what hoof prints look like, so little U-shapes to indicate where they've moved from. The campaign of 1876 was a 3-pronged affair. In the west, at Fort Ellis in Bozeman, Montana, Colonel Gibbon commanded the 7th Infantry, who, with the 2nd Cavalry, were going to march east. From the south, veteran of the Apache Wars, General Crook, led elements of the 2nd and 3rd Cavalry and 4th and 9th Infantry, along with Calamity Jane, northwards.
I'm Crook.
And from the east, from Fort Lincoln in Bismarck, General Terry commanded the Dakota Column, which consisted of not only the 7th Cavalry under Custer, but also 2 companies of the 17th Infantry and a Gatling gun detachment for the 20th Infantry. These were carried above the paddle steamer Far West, up the Yellowstone River. On to version 17, and the first thing you can see once you get past the loading screen is a lovely new font. This is essentially font 20 from Roberto Colombo's Charbank, and it's really rather nice. There are 2 Western style ones, but this one offered a Western style upper and lower case, and I've used this to add a new feature. Next to Troop A is an arrow pointing down and left. This is going to be used in the future for facing. Each troop has a facing, which is essentially where it moved last. The idea being that it faces forwards, but if you get attacked from behind, this is a bad thing. However, having to keep hammering the keys until it pays attention to you is getting more than a little bit annoying, so we're going to fix that next. Version 18 isn't a visual change, but it is more pleasant to play. Rather than holding the letter M, you can just press M and then C and then 7, which will be move, charge, west. This is because I've replaced in keys with a look at a peak. Peak 23560 is the last key pressed, and I assign that to a variable, and then I go, have you pressed the key? If it's one I care about, which is M for move, R for rest, S for status, L for look, or P for position, I poke it with 0, which means you've not pressed a key, and then go and take action. This means you don't have to keep hammering the keys in response. However, this also stops the engines moving, so after you've made an action, they will then get a go. In version 25, I've tackled the 7-second wait before you get to make a move. This period in basic was taken up with printing the 12 cavalry units, checking and printing the 40 Indian units, and then checking and printing for the 15 camps. This is all now done in machine code. I've essentially taken the existing logic and turned it into machine code, which is vastly faster, as you can see here. In version 26, I realised that most of the time you're going to be moving unless you're resting, but every time you move, you have to move and then select a speed. We've got an entire keyboard, so why not just skip that step and just charge, gallop, trot or walk. So I've skipped that entire step. You now select charge, gallop, trot or walk. The only extra code I had to put in was checking for night time, because at night time you cannot charge, gallop or trot, you can only walk. And now to charge west, you just type C for charge, 7 for west. Less key pressing, more action. That's the Custer way. Moving up to version 34, I've made a slight performance improvement again by changing the code that checks are you on a village, and if so are you burning it, from basic to machine code. But there's something else you can see on this screen. A little pink horsey thing. This is the pack train. In my extensive research, I found that the pack train was vital for the survival of Reno and Benteen's men, because they had enough ammunition to fight off the Sioux and the Cheyenne. Custer did not. So I've added in a pack train. This will be used to carry ammunition. At the moment, it's just an extra piece for you to move. It has men, it has fighting ability, it gets tired. The only difference is it can only move at a walk or a trot, because they're donkeys. They're not very fast. What are you up to there, General Crook?
Be very, very quiet. I'm stealing blankets.
General Crook's column advanced north until it reached the Rosebud River. Overnight, it was attacked.
It's the law! Scarpa!
Having suffered casualties, Terry retreated back to Fort Fetterman. Terry was not informed. This is the movement logic which, as of version 34, is unchanged. If it's night time, jump to 3070. Otherwise, if you charge, you're tired by 3 and E is set to 4. Galloping sets E to 3, tires you 2. Trotting sets E to 2, tires you 1. Walking sets E to 1. If it's at night time, E is 1 and you're tired. E is your speed, 1 to 4. Line 3120 then checks your direction, which is 1 to 8, and then does the appropriate math on the arrays U and L, which are your row and column coordinates. There is checking of bounds at the bottom. You can't go further east than 151, further west than 2, further south than 46, or further north than 2. There's also a check for terrain on line 3208. If the value at that address is greater than 1, then it's rough terrain and you're a bit tired. Intervening terrain doesn't count. While testing this out, I noticed something odd. From the start point, Troop A walks north into open terrain and is then tarred by 2. Troop B trots north into the trees, should be tarred by 3, but is in fact tarred by 1. After lots of calculations, I determined that the checking for terrain is off by 2 rows and 1 column, because there is rough terrain to the northwest of the starting location in a row 3. And because these are the unique graphics for the fort, there is some kind of ghost fort there. This is going to affect any checking of terrain, which is a bad thing. It's an easy fix though. And here's new and improved version 39. I'm going to send the first 4 troops of the cavalry north by walking, trotting, galloping and charging. There are trees in the way. Walking north shouldn't tar me at all. Trotting north should be tarred by 1 point for trotting, 2 points for the trees. Galloping should be 2 points for galloping and 4 points for trees. And charging should be 3 points for charging and 4 points for trees. And looking at the figures, that all adds up. Movement has been improved, so it's now done in a loop up to E, which is of course our speed. We set our X direction and Y direction appropriately in a few less lines of code. We also do a check to make sure the train we are moving into is not number 10. Number 10 is deep water, because originally you could just walk through the middle of a lake, which didn't seem enormously appropriate. I want to make water features actually matter. But to start with, we can just check for, is it actually fully water, in which case you just stop just before it. A big leap forward now to version 56, and I've found out how the graphics work. So I've made some changes. Most obvious changes that we're now in the desert, with cacti rather than lovely verdant woodland. All I had to do was go, it's terrain number 1, what colour is it? Well, it's yellow, not green. You may also notice that the hilltops are now a different colour. They're now bright yellow. The rivers are a different colour. They're now blue rather than cyan, apart from the ones that are cyan. More on those later. And on the right hand side you see here, high hilltops, which were white. I added new terrain type of hilltop, high hilltop, tree on a hill and tree on a double hill. I hooked into existing code, and at the end of it, I jumped to new code, copied existing. So rather than going, is it 25? Is it 26? I add my new attributes and new graphics. I also changed the cacti. I then had to change each individual hilltop to the new terrain types. And I did this methodically. I had the map which starts at address 50,000. I then cross-correlated this with each hilltop in memory, working my way through, identifying them, and then individually poking them one at a time. That's why there's quite a big jump in versions. Eagle-eyed viewers will spot something strange in the water. This is the ford, a new terrain type, and a rather special one, because you can't see it when you're using the look function to scroll around the map. It only exists when you're actually on the screen. Rivers are now impassable, not just these solid blocks of water. This includes riverbanks, anything that's not cyan. However, fords are. I wanted to make you look for fords through scouting, which seemed more thematically appropriate. I also wanted their position to be done randomly. So when you load the game, it randomly selects locations from a set of addresses I pre-calculated, and then dynamically places fords in them for you to discover and cross. We've improved the game's responsiveness, we've improved the speed of printing, we've changed up the graphics. Now it's time to look at the Sioux and the Cheyenne. In the original code, there are 40 Native American groups, and they are assigned to the 12 cavalry units. The first 3 Indian bands move towards the first, the second 3 the second, and so on. This leaves 4 unused. I decided to assign these 4 to attack the pack train. What is the logic for their movement? If their assigned target is still alive, they move towards him in the most direct path possible, either up, down, left or right, including diagonal. Terrain does not count. If, however, their target is dead, then instead their target is the fort, or rather the space north of the fort where the cavalry start. This can be seen here, where the Native Americans are just charging after the cavalry in the most direct path possible, playing round and round the Ring of Roses. At a first step of snorkification, I just translated this logic directly into machine code, still keeping the restriction that they cannot move at night, because that was quite good, still keeping the ability to ignore terrain, A, because it's a lot easier, I don't have to worry about having to cross rivers and pathfinding, but also because that's historically accurate, because Native Americans could cross rivers that the cavalry couldn't. Then I got to thinking, the Sioux and the Cheyenne were not actually heat-seeking missiles flying across the prairies, intent on destruction. Most of the time, they were trying to stay out of the way of the cavalry, apart from the Battle of the Rosebud, where young hotheads decided to go and attack. So I gave the different bands different goals. Each band has a single byte dedicated to a goal, which is either 0 to 13. If it's 1 to 13, then it goes after that particular cavalry unit. 0, however, it moves towards its assigned camp. The idea is they're going home. A lot of Native American bands were moving from the reservations to the great big camp on the Little Bighorn River. What if the camp is destroyed? In the original game, camps had either a status of 0, which is fine, or 2, it had been levelled. What we do now is when a camp is burned, we set the identity of the cavalry unit that did it in the flag. And if a unit is set to go home, but the camp has been destroyed, then they will seek revenge. They also seek revenge at a faster speed than normal, moving 2 spaces instead of 1. This can be a real problem for the cavalry. If the cavalry go and attack a Native American band, that band will also seek revenge on it. If a band moves next to the cavalry and there's a fight, that's considered no harm, no foul. But if the cavalry move next to them, that's cavalry aggression, and they will not stand for it. Can be seen here, Troop A has attacked the Indians on the river, had a bit of a battle, then thought better of it, and is now retreating towards the fort, being pursued.
Let's make camp for tonight. The men need to eat their custard. Custard's got everything a growing trooper needs.
Blue shadows on the trail.
17! I'm putting you in charge of the pack train. Make sure we have enough delicious custard to keep the men fed.
This is how combat worked in the original. The first thing to do is find out what terrain we're on based on peeking at an address in memory. The calculation was slightly wrong. We need to know what the sort of terrain it is, and if it's not 1, which is flat ground, it counts as rough terrain. We then compare the E and the C. E is enemy, C is cavalry. If one of them is on rough terrain and the other is not, they have an advantage. If both are, or neither are, it's the same. The cavalry then automatically lose between 0 and 4 men. If they're still alive, then the cavalry lose more men based on the proportion of Native Americans to them, modified slightly by terrain. The Native Americans then lose between 0 and 75 men, presumably based on rifle fire or some such. If they're not dead, they then lose troops in combat based on the proportion of cavalry versus them. Native American bands start with 100 men, cavalry start with 52. As before, we start with a terrain check. This time it's done with machine code. In the original, all we cared about was, is the terrain not normal or not? So if it's flat, it doesn't count, otherwise it's rough terrain. This meant that if you were on a river, you had an advantage over somebody on the plains. If you're on a slope, you have the advantage over somebody on the plains, but also somebody on a hilltop, which didn't make a lot of sense. This machine code, and there are two little routines, one for the cavalry, one for the Native Americans, with one subtle difference, ranks the terrain they are on. The worst possible terrain being the middle of a lake or on a ford where you have no cover. Then it goes up to riverbanks. Then a normal flat terrain is ranking of 2. Being in the cacti is 3. A slope is 4. Hilltop is 5. Being in the trees on a hilltop is 6. Being on a hilltop being on a slope going further up is 7. Being on a double hilltop is 8. Being in the trees on the top of a high hill is 9. And for the cavalry only, being in the fort is a 10. For we compare the two types, and this time the person with the better terrain gets the advantage. If the cavalry are dismounted, they get double the advantage. It doesn't go all the cavalry's way, however. There is a check to see if the Native Americans are in the cacti or in the trees or in the pine trees. If they are, they count as being in cover. This comes up later. If we're in combat, there are 9 squares the Native Americans could potentially be in comparison to the cavalry. In 3 of the squares, they count as being in front. 2 of the squares count as being a flank attack. 3 squares count as a rear attack. And of course, there is 1 square where they're in the very same square. I use a bit of machine code here to set the variable face appropriately. If they were directly in front of us, then we do the shooting part. Rather than losing up to 75 men, they in fact lose up to the cavalry strength of men. If the Native Americans are in cover, their losses are halved. If it's night time, it is also halved. This only takes place, though, if the cavalry have ammunition. Remember when I added the pack train? This is what it's for. Cavalry start with 10 bullets each. The pack train has 255. Moving on to the pack train will top up your ammunition. Or moving into the fort will do the same thing. And the pack train can also top its ammunition up by moving into the fort. What if the cavalry are dismounted? If they're dismounted, they gain a 50% bonus to the casualties caused by shooting. If they're dismounted and have lost their horses, they have no need to hold their horses, therefore they do double damage. Facing is applied as increased damage to the cavalry in melee. If they're in front, there is no increased damage. There's also an increase in casualties depending on how tired the cavalry are. The Native Americans do not suffer from fatigue. However, they also don't move at night. If the cavalry are dismounted and they get into close combat, there is a chance that the Native Americans will scatter the horses, which were held by 1 in 4 of the men, and then the cavalry are then forced to walk. Let's see how combat works in action. Troop C is going to advance. We have crossed the first river. The 7th Cavalry are ready for action. It's now 10 in the morning on Tuesday. And there's a battle between the Oglala. Horses have been scattered. Troop B has been massacred. And they're all dead. Horses can be scattered if a troop is dismounted and they are in close combat on the same square. There was a chance. Oh, and we just lost Troop C as well. So that's Thomas Custer dead, the double Medal of Honor winner. And now Troop I is fighting. They're nowhere near Native Americans, but have also been massacred. It's not going very well. There are some issues with the code. There are actually 2 bugs in effect here. Troop H is dead. One of them is my fault. I have the code to check for facing. Unfortunately, I've loaded music on top of it. So when facing is returned, it should be 0 to 100. In fact, it's being returned as 42,000. We see here the casualties are quite horrendous. We've lost troops B, C, H and I. They are all dead. And the 7th Cavalry are so cool because they've killed 7 Indians. Seventh Cavalry is a completely silent game. It was published in 1985 before the 128k Spectrum, but it's now 2025, so I think it's time to take advantage of the AY chip. The advantage of the AY chip is if you don't have a 128k Spectrum, it's just ignored. You control the AY chip using out statement. You select a register by writing out to a certain port and then send data to a different port. This can be done in BASIC, it's a little bit slow, or it can be done in machine code. In the game Gangster, I knocked together an interrupt-driven AY player, which just about worked, but was rather clunky and required lots of poking of random bits of addresses. This is a slightly improved version. When we turn on the player, we write to various registers of the AY chip. Registers 0 and 1 control the tone for channel A. Register 7 is the general how much sound there is, and 191 means don't play any sound at all. 11 and 12 are the length of the envelope, and register 8 tells the AY chip that I want channel A, the first of 3 channels, to have an envelope-controlled volume, not fixed volume. When it comes to notes, each note has a frequency, which is held in 2 bytes, coarse and fine, which are written to different registers. It also has a length. As the interrupt routine is called 50 times a second, I have to make a guess at how long the note is, which is done in whole units of 1. A note of 1 plays 1/50th of a second, a note of 2 is twice as long, and so on. Whenever we call the AY chip to start playing a note, we tell it that we want a tone on channel A, and also got the waveform of 1. It's the nice plinkety-plonkety waveform. Let's load the code up and activate it and hear it in action. We've forgotten something, and that is to provide it with any notes. What it's doing is starting at address 0, which is the very start of the ZX Spectrum ROM, and attempting to play those as notes. Some of those might actually be frequencies we can hear, so you'll hear little random plinkety-plonks. And it'll keep playing these forever. It won't go through the entire ROM though, because the note counter is a single byte, so eventually it will wrap at 255 and start again. The 7th Cavalry have their own theme tune, Garryowen, a traditional Irish tune, which was also the theme tune of the British Light Brigade of the famous Charge. Here's the sheet music provided by FluteTunes.com. I code these in as a series of beep statements, and let her rip. I turn the beep statements into a series of notes of fixed duration, with the shortest note being a 1, and then put these as a series of pokes into memory. I need to turn the note frequencies, rather than the beep statements, 12 being high C, 0 being middle C, and so on, into the frequencies known by the AY chip. These are actually in a helpful table, and I put these all in a series of data statements, so I know that if it's note 12, I in fact poke these 2 frequencies into memory. Loading the code into memory, and then telling the routine where the 3 parts are, the fine notes, the coarse notes, and the lengths, and the length of the tune. I can put them all into memory, and then play my interrupt-driven routine. And to prove it's interrupt-driven, not just a load of beeps, you can actually carry on coding and execute code while listening. Marvellous. But just one tune isn't going to be enough. For my extensive research, there are 3 tunes played by the 7th Cavalry's band as they set off. Garryowen is their traditional marching song, The Girl I Left Behind, and Ain't I Glad I Got Out the Wilderness. I was able to find the sheet notes for The Girl I Left Behind in the Remick portfolio of silent movie music, and I was able to find the music for Ain't I Glad I Got Out the Wilderness, which I first heard on The Simpsons as Old Grey Mare She Ain't What It Used to Be, online as well. That's the cavalry music. What about Native Americans? Don't they get any nice tunes? Well, I don't know where to get the tunes for those, so I went to Remick. The alternative would be to get the music from Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which does have little tunes at the start of each chapter, but that seems enormously disrespectful. So you've got a shadow dance, a war dance, and an Ojibwe war song, which is really wrong because the Ojibwe were also known as the Chippewa, and the Chippewa, once they were given guns by the French, drove the Sioux out of the Great Lakes region. I then combined them all into one big block of memory with all the addresses at the end and saved those for use in the game.
Looks like we caught 'em napping. An ideal time to steal those blankets. Now, Benteen, I want you to go up over yonder and look for hostiles. Right up to the bluffs. If you don't see hostiles, go to the first valley. If you see no hostiles there, go to the second valley. And just keep on going. So I'll just bugger off then, shall I? Typical. Now, Major Reno, I'll walk the line. I want you to cross the river, advance on the village. I'll advance on the other side and get all the glory. I will let you down. I can't see no Indians. I see smoke signals. If only I knew what they meant.
This is the absolute final version, version 192. When I first started doing the numbering, I gave it 3 digits and thought, there, that's overkill. I won't need more than 2, and I got into 3 quite comfortably. The game takes about 4.5 minutes to load, which isn't too bad, to be fair. And once it starts, we get music straight away. It's Reveille. Then once you start the game, you get the dulcet tones of Garryowen. Music only plays in 128k mode, and there are 2 special keys to control it. Space moves you to the next tune, of which there are 6. There are actually 8 tunes in the game, but 6 are selectable. Space moves to the next one, and they cycle around, and pressing enter stops music. This is quite useful. By evening on the first day, 4 troops commanded by Benteen and the pack train are approaching a ford amidst a cactus forest. They are all, however, rather weary. There's been some combat and Troop C has been massacred. In the north, 3 companies commanded by Moylan, Yates and McIntosh are advancing over the plains. They've had a tough fight in the cactus forests and they're all getting rather tired. And they can see hostiles approaching. What's the best thing to do? Run for the hills. There are hills to the north of them which provide excellent defensive terrain. Maybe they can hold out there until nightfall. 3 bands are approaching, but by adopting defensive positions on the high ground and possibly dismounting, there's a chance of fighting it out. Troop A, though, is down to 16 men. The men use the time before the battle to rest up, ready for the onslaught. The pack train approaches from the south to bring much needed ammunition. And here they come. Charging up the hill, the Cheyenne lose 16 men to carbine fire and then 2 in melee. That's 18 down, but Moylan loses 8 men. He only has 8 left. And he's lost his horses. McIntosh enters the fight. He's already facing the Cheyenne, so they lose another 34 to rifle fire and 7 in melee. This is the advantage of position. The fighting continues, so the men are increasingly exhausted. Fighting actually makes your men tired. But they don't want to move, because walking is bad, because it turns your back to the enemy. However, being on the same square is also bad, so they are now in a very sticky position, and Troop A have been massacred. Troop F is still in the fight though, and their rifle fire is doing a lot of damage on the next Cheyenne unit to advance. Remember, they're coming up the hill directly towards them, which means they are at a disadvantage. High ground beats the slope. And they've wiped out 1 troop of the Cheyenne. There were two more coming though. Here come the Hunk Papa, and they've lost a lot of troops. 70 to rifle fire and 19 in melee. They're nearly wiped out on their first attack. Troop F fires at them, taking out another 18. This is textbook combat from the dismounted cavalry, however, they've just lost their horses. The Hung Papa have now entered close combat, yet done terrible damage to Yates, because Yates' troops are absolutely exhausted and have all been massacred. This is a bad thing. When you're vastly outnumbered, this is a bad thing. Here come the pack train though, ready to save the day. Advancing north, they're showing willing. It's almost nightfall. In real life, the sun set at around 8 PM on this time of year. Now it's night time, which means the Native Americans do not move. So there's a chance for Macintosh to get away. He can only do so by walking, but if he can get away one space, he's then free and clear. Unfortunately, he's going to turn his back to the Hunk Papa, which is not a good idea because they throw axes at the back of his head. And they're all now dead. Over to Benteen. We see with the score now, the 7th Cavalry have killed 900 Native Americans, but have lost 2/3 of their men and have burned no camp. Time to save the game at the end of the first day. Benteen's battalion spends the night either resting or moving their way slowly out of the cactus forest and assuming defensive positions for the morning. It's now morning and the Sans Arc are going to attack. However, Company L under Calhoun is striking out west looking for camps. It's a tough fight against the Sans Arc and Troop K is massacred. But eventually the 7th Cavalry heroically defeat the enemy and carry on their mission. But what's Calhoun doing? Calhoun drives Company L north and west through the cactus forest looking for camps to destroy. The Cyan River is easily crossable and he's trying to work out where best to do so without tiring his men too much. Moving through the forest is tiring, moving through riverbanks is also tiring, and you don't want to be too tired. There's a hill to the north, but hostiles to the west. Let's charge northwest into the forest, try to evade them. They're not enormously hostile, which is nice. Is this my clever coding? Is this unexpected behaviour? We've definitely now sighted some camps though. If Calhoun had continued north on the original side of the river, he would have found an undefended camp. But now there are at least 4 camps open before him to destroy. He's going to charge up to attack. Unfortunately, the camps are not undefended. He is attacked and loses 18 men in hand-to-hand combat, which is half his command. There's now an additional attack from an additional band, which takes the rest of his command out, and his scalp. Troop L and Calhoun are now all dead. Don't go off on your own.
Run on to our manifest destiny! Halt! Prepare to fight on foot.
Tactical withdrawal.
We found a village. Get me my best bugler.
It's me, Martini, il ragazzo boogie woogie della compagnia B.
Now, Martini, I want you to give the order to Captain Benteen. Tell him there's a big village, bring up the packs, and hurry up about it. Here, I've written it down.
I gather them good.
This leaves the remains of Benteen's battalion, who advance at a more measured pace, arriving in the area late afternoon. They split themselves on both sides of the river in order to maximise their chances of causing destruction. Benteen's H battalion here has a village north and slightly northeast, and he's also got the pack train with him. Keogh, who used to work for the Pope, is on the west side. He's walking northwest, nice and measured, and Captain French, with his onions, is also walking north. We are walking not charging. Charging is very tiring. Walking does not tire you at all. And the hostiles aren't very hostile at the moment, which is useful for us. I mean, we want to keep it that way. Once we start destroying villages, they become very hostile very quickly. So we need to get in there, do the damage, and attack. Now we have some movement there towards Captain Keogh, I believe, which suits Benteen because it leaves the camp undefended. We haven't got the men, or the numbers, or the guns to engage in random combat. Benteen's going to make sure he enters the village facing the right way, so he doesn't want. Because he could have trotted northwest into the village, but that would have left him open to a flank attack. By going to the east of the village and approaching from the east, he will now face the village and the Indians beyond it, exposing them to his rifle fire. Bit of tactics there. We have split the 7th Cavalry again into 3 portions to cause the maximum amount of damage in the minimum amount of time. Each time we lose a troop in its entirety, we make a count of this. And the pack train is attacking the mini Konju. Once you've lost 7 units, there is a chance that each additional unit will lead to the loss of your player character. Because originally, in the original version, you commanded Troop A, that's now commanded by Moylan, but now you're commander of the whole 7th Cavalry, but you still need a chance to die. We want to be historically accurate. We've destroyed a village, it's now on fire, which is indicated by the flashing icon. Originally they were just levelled and went black. Now I've decided, look, you're doing something horrible, you've got to own it. You're going to own up to the horrible things you've done. Just now flashing. So Troop M is in combat. Troop M is shooting the Hunk Papa, causing 6 casualties to them. But taking 12 in return. That's not so good for Captain French. Troop H has 1 man left, and that's Benteen.
Oh! Is this the end of Benteen?
And of course, he didn't die alone, but with Lieutenant Colonel Custer. This leaves the 7th Cavalry in the capable hands of Major Marcus Reno.
I keep a gold watch on this heart of mine. I keep a gold watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes out for the eyes of mine. Because it's mine. I walk the line.
I'm sure everything will be fine. What's left of them?
The little girls. The little girls get bigger every day. The little girl. Oh, that doesn't sound very appropriate. Boof.
That's Captain French down, leaving only Captain Keogh, he used to work for the Pope, and the pack train. The pack train cannot destroy camps. However, Keogh has given it a good go. The old college try, as we say. Can he destroy 15 camps before he gets wiped out? Captain Keogh's horse, the only survivor of Custer's last stand, and was looked after by the 7th Cavalry. He was called Comanche. But he is on our side!
Requiescit in pace, Keogh.
The answer is no. No, he cannot. This leaves the pack train and their donkeys alone in the middle of several thousand hostile Native Americans. And the Muleskinners are skinned alive. That is the end of the 7th Cavalry. And the end of our playthrough. The victor is Sitting Bull, and a well-deserved victory to the defenders, who just wanted to be left alone. The score of this game is interesting. You lose points by losing men, which is fine. You also lose points by killing the enemy, which is somewhat confusing. So to get the best score, you need to destroy all the camps without losing too many men, and without killing too many men either. Perhaps this was moral commentary on the whole business. Don't do this thing.
Who's shooting at us? I can't see no Indians. Stand fast, men! They don't call me courageous Custer for nothing.
They killed my brother Tom! Make for the hills! Where in tarnation is Benteen?
You, Martini, what is it? Spit it out. Capitano Bentini. Messaggio della colonnello Zabalione. Bigger the village, bigger the pack, subito, subito. I can't even read this, let alone understand you. Well, I guess it's time for Custer to stand for the last time. For God's sake, Benteen. Majorino! Hold your command and help me. I've lost half my men. I've got some kind of orders from Custer. I shot a man. Just to watch him die. I never liked Custard anyway. I'm a cool whip man. They'll call this Last Stand Hill in honour of my heroic historic victory against overwhelming odds. I will make you hurt. You won't take my empire of dirt.
You'll never take on glory, to be sure, to be sure. Ah!
Benteen, it's like a ring of fire. Oh, say, can you see? I can't see anyone. They're all hiding in trees and bushes and ravines. Where the rockets in the fort, we don't need rockets or sabers or guns. We've got rifles. And say, can you see that I've run out of bullets in the land of the free and the home of the brave? Play ball! Where's Custer? I presume he's split. I told him. Those guns were made in Swansea. Uncle Sam's only going to pay half. Cavalry Americana.